Yeah, so you're asking me what qualifies me to speak on the subject of Freemasonry. Well, I had only been active in Freemasonry for 10 years. I became a Freemason in 1994, and I was active until 2004. But to this day, I encounter people, or people recognize me, or people find me online, or they hear my name, and they'll say, like, hey, you were David Gray. You know, like I'm not David Gray anymore. Like, yeah, you were, hey, man, you accomplished so much, man. I looked up to you. Man, you did things that nobody has done since. You were young, man. And like, the book you wrote, Inside Prince Hall, man, one of the greatest books ever been written about Prince Hall, man. What happened to you? you know, so, I get that quite often, but, now I look back and like, yeah, I mean, I was young, I was smart, I was talented, I was ambitious, and I lived and breathed Freemasonry. And I put everything that I had into it. I mean, I just gave Freemasonry everything I had. It was what I knew. It was my life. It was how I identified. It was my religion. And I was, like I said, people gave me a lot of opportunities, a lot of advancement, because they seen, like, man, this kid that he's just, this is him. This is what he's doing. Let's take his energy and let's just use it. So I was given a lot of opportunities to advance. And I was in my 20s, in my early 30s, and I loved Freemasonry. So some advancement that I had, opportunities I had become a worshipful master of a local lodge. It's the highest office that you can have in the lodge. And some people is the highest office that you can have in Freemasonry, being the master of a local lodge. And so I was worship master when I was maybe 25, 26. But at that time, I was probably the youngest worshipful master that had ever been in the state of Ohio. After I had become a Master Mason in 2004, maybe a year later, I had joined the Royal Arch. I became a Royal Arch Mason. I started my journey up the York Rite of Freemasonry. And a couple years after, I was a worshipful master of a local lodge. I had been elected the high priest of a Royal Arch chapter, which is the highest chapter of Royal Arch. And so I continued my journey up the York Rite. I was a Royal and Select Master, and also I had reached the highest house in the York Rite, which is a Knights Templar. I never been an elected officer of either one of those houses, the Royal Select Master or the Knights Templar, but I had been appointed to several offices there too. And I had also started my journey up the Scottish Rite shortly after I become a Master Mason, which is the third degree Mason, if you don't know. And so in the Scottish Rite, I had been made a 32nd degree Mason shortly after. Again, after I had come into the lodge. Never held any elected offices in that house, but I held many appointed offices, and I was working my way up to becoming the head of the house, which would be commander-in-chief. I had been, in the Order Eastern Star, which is a female body of the Masonic Order. They still have to have male members, and the highest male office in that house is a worthy patron. So I had been elected that and held that office for numerous years. So several Grand Lodge appointments. I had won many awards, had won many decorations, have been given to me for the work I had done, for the things that I had written. I had become the founding editor of the Dr. Charles H. Wesley Masonic Research Society, which was a big deal at that time, and had published several different journals out of there. And I was the first Prince Hall Freemason. Prince Hall Freemasonry is the predominantly black set of Freemasonry. But I became the first Prince Hall Freemason to also have dual membership into a predominantly white Grand Lodge. I had become a member of the Ohio Lodge of Research, which was a big deal. And I had become an actual fellow of the Flag Society, which is another research society in Prince Hall Freemasonry. So because of the books I've been written, the work I had done, that had made me a fellow of that society. I had been commissioned by the research lodges of Australia and New Zealand to write a book about Prince Hall Freemasonry, and I did in 2003. And part of that, in conjunction with that, I had toured Australia and New Zealand speaking about the subject. And my last appointment to the Grand Lodge was I had become the district deputy of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio. And the deputy is pretty much the representative of the Grand Master. And my district consisted mainly of just Western Ohio. Ohio. So my experience in Freemasonry X, what qualifies me to talk about this subject, is because my experience was so expansive. And as far as I know, I'm probably the most highly decorated Freemason to ever convert to Catholicism. Yeah, why did I become a Freemason? You asked, but I think I always wanted I always wanted to be a Freemason from the time I was a kid, for as long as I knew. My father my stepfather was a Freemason. My grandfather was a Freemason. I remember as a kid, I was going through my stepfather's belongings, as kids do. They sneak around when their parents aren't home. So I'm going through his drawers, and I find his apron, and I find this ritual book. It was coded and everything. And I'm like, what is this? My dad belongs to some sort of secret society. I mean, I was so impressed with him by him at that time. I was like, wow, I didn't know this. It's like finding out your dad is a superhero. Like, wow, my dad has a cape. So, yeah, and in the front of the community that I came from, being a Freemason was a big deal. And I thought Freemasons knew things that other people didn't. I didn't know the words back then, like Gnostic and things like that, esoteric. But, I thought Freemasons knew things that other people didn't. So I just kind of wanted that knowledge. And I thought I'd have to wait till I was much older to become a Freemason. But the university I went to, a predominantly black university, had Freemasons on campus who were my age, and I started going to some of their activities and some of the informational sessions that they were doing, and one thing led to another, and so I'm a sophomore in college, and the next thing you know, I'm a Freemason, right? I think most guys in college, want to join a fraternity, and I did too, right? And I later on did join the Mega Psi Phi fraternity. But Freemasonry was the first thing. I was like, wow, when I saw that opportunity, I hopped on that, right? Everything else will have to wait. So, yeah, I was, 21 and 22, and I'm a Freemason. Yeah, so a big question. Why did you leave Freemasonry? That's a good question, and it's really a simple answer. I left Freemasonry because I became a Catholic, and that's it. When I was going through the RCI process, right, the Christian initiation process, I found out that it's always been the Catholic teaching the Catholic Church in 1738 that Catholics can't be Freemasons. So it was never really a choice. I chose the church because the church is true, right? The church makes saints, right? Freemasonry proposes that it makes good men better, but the Catholic Church makes saints. So it was really a no-brainer. And the Catholic. So when I took my oath as a Catholic now, that I believe all that the Catholic Church teaches is true because it was revealed by God. Well, that's part of that body of work. That's part of that dogmatic teaching that's been revealed by God, that Catholics can't be Freemasons. So the date I was confirmed, August 8th, 2006, was really the last day that I can really say that I was a Freemason because I became Catholic. And I always tell people that if I was still a Protestant, I would probably still be a Freemason because there's nothing in the Bible that explicitly says that a Christian can't be a Freemason. There's some things you can apply here and there, some things that's, implicit perhaps, but there's really what Catholicism had, for me, it had that authority, it had that authoritative teaching that Protestantism doesn't have. So for a Catholic, there's no other choice, either, and this is grave matter. And I definitely know that there are Catholics who are Freemasons, but they're excommunicated. And because by virtue of them being disobedient to this grave matter, some of them don't know they're excommunicated. Some of them are still receiving communion, but they are excommunicated by virtue of being a Freemason. They don't need some pope or priest telling them that they're excommunicated. They're excommunicated by virtue of the act. Late Cynthia, they're excommunicated by virtue of the act. So I never wanted to be in that situation. What's the point of being a Catholic if you're excommunicated? So I was confirmed in the church in 2006. In about 2009, I wrote an essay about why Catholics cannot be Freemasons. And I'll put a link to it down in the bottom of this video, but it's still a very popular article online. A lot of people visit it every day. And I never really felt inclined to really expand that article into a book because I had read this book by John Salza. It's talking about why Catholics cannot be Masons. And I think this book suffices. I mean, there are a lot of things in this book I would have written differently, probably approached the whole subject differently, but never to such a degree that I think warranted my time and effort to write a new book on the subject. I think this book suffices, and I recommend it for people who want to know why Catholics can be Freemasons. You know, my article as well, but this is a little more in depth, so to speak. I really don't care for so much for this book, Masonry Unmasked. It's also by John Salza, Insiders Reveals the Secrets of the Lodge. I don't recommend that one, and primarily because it's not, the last thing you want to do as a Catholic, if you've never been a Freemason, is read this book and then go tell Freemason why they can't, why what's wrong with Freemasonry. Because as people do, I think like John Salza, who didn't have a lot of exposure to universal Freemasonry, he makes a lot of blanket statements. The thing to remember, I would tell you about Freemasonry, is that Freemasonry is like Protestantism. It's broken down in thousands of different Masonic jurisdictions throughout the world, and none of them believe the same thing about everything. They don't. They're like Protestants in a sense. I think there's some things that they all agree on, and that's what makes them regular Freemasons versus irregular. And we'll talk in a minute about irregular Masons. But so all the regular Masons, so to speak, agree on these same things, right? But as far as comes to ritual, if there's 1,000 different Masonic jurisdictions, there's about 900 different Masonic rituals and things, little things that they believe. So the last thing you want to do is read some of this about what goes on in the lodge and go tell Freemasons, hey, no one goes on in the lodge, and they'll laugh at you. So it's to the point, something like this is sort of harmful, because if you're trying to lead a Freemason away from the Masonic lodge, what you don't want to do is, what's immediately a turnoff to a Freemason, is you tell them what they believe, and then they say, "Whoa, that's not in my ritual. That's not what I experienced in my ritual." But you read it in this book here, that, oh, this is what goes on in the ritual. No, it's better to stick with just philosophy and basic generalities about why Freemasonry is incompatible with Catholicism or incompatible with Christianity, just on a philosophical level, than rather to get into their rituals and things like that, because that's the minutia, that's the red herrings and the weeds and things like that. You can really make a strong case just using reason and logic and philosophy, rather than getting into some issues that you're never going to agree on and just really end up looking stupid and they end up laughing at you. You asked me if it was worth it. Well, that's really a deep question, because in one sense, I want to say, well, no, I don't think it was worth it, because I wouldn't do it again, knowing what I know now. But at the same time, and I say that because I wouldn't do it knowing what I know now, because I think, one, right, I'm Catholic now. I know that it's incompatible, that you can't be a Freemason if you're a Christian. But also, all the time that I spent in Freemasonry, I think I was a much better Freemason than I was a husband at that time, right? I spent so much time at lodge meetings and chasing this dream to eventually become the Grand Master, that I lost out on a lot of time with my family, with my daughters. So, definitely wouldn't do it again for those reasons. But also, I have to look at Freemasonry as I look at my time I spent in Protestantism, that God used it to make me who I am today. All the experience I had throughout Freemasonry and Protestant, all the leadership opportunities I had, everything that I learned made me who I am today. And God knew this from the foundations of the earth, that this would be my path, and that He will conform my bad decisions into His glory, right? So, And all the men I met while I was a Freemason, some who are still my friends to this day. I mean, men who I can count on. I can call one up today and be like, hey, can you check on my daughter? And the brotherhood that we established during that time there, that bonding we established, you say, hey, you're not a Freemason, David, anymore, but, we were friends, and I'll do this for you. And I would do that for him. He could call on me as a friend. And so a lot of good relationships I started there. And men who were with me at some of the darkest times in my life and came to me and prayed for me and prayed with me, and men who gave me my first Bible that helped me during my conversion from agnosticism. So I wasn't a believer, but these men reached out to me and prayed for me, and it led to my conversion. So again, God used my time there. And I look back, I mean, there's some regrets. I look back at the time I was the district deputy, representing the Grand Master. I remember I would tell all the masters of the lodges that they couldn't. I would just enforce Anderson's Constitution. I was an agnostic. I was anti-Christian. That's what I was, more than an agnostic. I hated the name of Jesus. I thought Jesus was fiction. I thought Jesus was made up, and I thought Christians were just a silly religion, right? And so when I became the district deputy, it was really my opportunity to enforce Anderson's Constitution. And there's Freemasonry is supposed to be a non-secular organization. It's a universal brotherhood where all men can agree, whatever your creed, whatever your religion, whatever your background. As long as you believe you belong to a monotheistic religion, Judaism, Islam, as long as you believe there is one God, not you or a polytheist. So this is supposed to be a place where all people can agree on. So we don't bring up the deities' names. And I thought it was a good rule, but it's something had never been my experience in Freemasonry. Not just Prince-Hall Freemasonry. I've seen this in predominantly white lodges as well. People ending prayers in Jesus' name. And that always offended me. It always hurt my ears. It was very painful, right? And so when I became the district deputy, wow, it's my time to enforce this rule. We're not going to end any prayers in Jesus' name. We're not going to be singing any church songs in the lodge with Jesus' name in it. And so I enforced that rule. And I told all the masters, worship masters, all the lodges that I was responsible for, that when I come to inspect your lodge, I better not hear any prayers ending in Jesus' name or Allah's name or any deity's name. And they were all obedient to that rule. And there was a part of me that was disappointed in Christians for obeying me instead of standing up for the faith that they believed in. And so I look back, regret that as a Christian. Now that's, I know that was wrong. And I'm sure just like Paul, look back on this time when he saw persecuting Christians, there's a part of you just looks back and it's like, that's painful for what you did, persecuting people for their faith. But I remember this one gentleman, I forget what lodge it was in Dayton, Equity, Unity, Ancient Square, whatever, Harmony. But during the inspection, during the first prayer, was a Masonic prayer, because Masons have their own prayers, they can read, and he eloquently read a Masonic prayer at the opening of the lodge. But at the end, I'm sitting there, writing on my inspection, and I hear, coming from the center of the lodge, the most powerful, the most eloquent, the most Christian prayer I'd ever heard in my life. Loud, strong, full of conviction. And then I knew it was coming. He ended the prayer in Jesus' name. And part of me was like, upset, but really I wasn't, because really I was full of respect for what this man had done, because he knew the consequences. I could have just marked down the lodge. I could have stood up and talked about Anderson's Constitution. I could have pulled him to the side. I mean, there were consequences, right? But he, perhaps, I don't know what it was. Maybe the first prayer he read, maybe he sat down and thought about it, remember who he was, supposed to be as a Christian, that you can't deny your God. Because if you're a Christian, you can't. That's what I understand about it. Because I know Protestants don't have the authority mouthpiece. They don't have anyone to tell them you can't be a Freemason. They don't have the authority like Catholics do. But just, I don't know how you belong to an organization that tells you that you can't speak the name of Jesus. Like, this is your Lord. This is your God. But this man, at this moment, this time, he did. And so I really couldn't be that upset, because I was like, finally, a martyr. Finally, someone who believes in what he says he believes. Finally, somebody who walks the walk. And that was something absent from Christianity. And one of many reasons I never really even seriously considered Freemasonry, because I really didn't see the martyrs. I didn't see anybody who really lived their faith. No one who ever already stood up to me, because I was a boisterous, I was a proud anti-Christian. Always telling people they didn't believe in, that Jesus was fiction, and no one ever really stood up to me. And but this man did, and I respected that. And I don't know the man's name I don't recall his name, but I can see his face. I know exactly what he looked like, because that was one of those turning point moments that I had found him, right? I had found the one. So, yeah, to answer your question, was it worth it? I don't know. I mean, ask God. He knew I was going to be a Freemason. He used that as to make me eventually who he wanted me to be. So I wouldn't do it again. But was it worth it? I don't know. Ask God. Yeah, common misunderstandings about Freemasonry. I think Catholics, by and large, who are interested in this issue, understand how Freemasonry is a clear and present danger, how it is how it invades against what the Catholic Church is teaching. And it's always extremely disappointing to drive around a parking lot after Mass, or coming into Mass, or leaving Mass, and you see a Masonic symbol on the back of a car. Extremely disappointing, right? Just the complete disregard that Catholics have for the teachings of the Church. But as I always tell people, I know Catholic Freemasons, and I know Catholics who think abortion is cool, right? Or same-sex marriage is cool, right? So you have people who are not who they say they are, or live life that's contradictory to their faith. You have hypocrites. And I wrote an article about this, maybe 2003, 2002, about how Freemasonry is religion, right? This isn't something Freemasons agree on, right? Some will fight you on this issue, but it is clear. Freemasonry does have a deity. It does have a tradition. It does have a moral law. It does offer some sort of path to get to some place that's beyond, after death. So it has some of the basic elements of a religion. So it's a cretic religion, to be sure. I mean, it's mixing in things from other different religions, but Freemasonry is a religion. And you can no more be a Catholic and a Muslim at the same time, or a Catholic and a Mormon at the same time, than you can be a Catholic and a Freemason. You can't belong to two religions at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. Now, where Catholics get off track is really getting into the weeds of the issue and focusing on the who rather than the what. I mean, there's some Catholics out there who I like a lot of the work that they do. But when it comes to Freemasonry, they do more harm than good, because they're so obsessed with the issue. They know nothing really about it, but they love talking about it. And again, they focus too much on the who rather than the what. Michael Voris is one completely obsessed about Freemasonry. I really don't think he understands what he's talking about a lot of the time, and he talks about it a lot of the time. Dr. Taylor Marshall has some guy on his show. I think his name is Timothy Gordon. He talks about Freemasonry quite often. One time I watched this video, he's talking about something called a blue mason and a red mason. I don't know what that is. I think it would serve everyone better. Talk about the dangers of Freemasonry. but talk about the dangers of Freemasonry, not about the dangers of Freemasons. Stick with the philosophy of the issue. We always have to make that distinction again, right? The Protestantism and the Protestant, Freemasonry, the philosophy of it, and the Freemason. Sometimes these things don't have anything to do with each other, because you'll have Freemasons who have no idea what Freemason actually teaches, just like you have Protestants who really don't know why they're Protestant, so we always have to focus on the issue rather than the person so much, because then you get off into the weeds and then you get off track. So I want to say a lot of focus on the who. We focus too much on who. I'm talking about all these, it's always some sort of Masonic conspiracy that, these Catholics are talking about. Somebody who in the lodge or who in the Vatican is a Freemason, and they're doing this and they're doing that. I think first we have to make a distinction between Freemasonry is governed by an idea called relativism, that nothing is really absolutely true. Right? And it's offering this alternative path to this life beyond. That's why it's the enemy of the Catholic Church. But relativism isn't owned by Freemasonry. So there are people who believe in relativism and modernism and secularism who aren't Freemasons, but yes, they are in the Vatican. Yes, they are priests. They are bishops. They are cardinals. They believe in this ideology. And so by saying that these people are Freemasons, let's just call things what they are. Let's stop getting to these little sexy conspiracy stories and all this stuff and making people be scared of Freemasons, because by doing that, you throw them off track, and you water down really what the real issue and what the real danger is relativism in church, is modernism, is secularism, is humanism in the church. And all these ideologies, yes, Freemasons believe them philosophically. But that's the issue. It's not that these people are Freemasons. They can be monkeys. They can be communists. They can be whatever. It's not what they belong to. It's what they believe. And there's people at the highest levels of the church who believe in these false ideologies, who may or may not be Freemasons. But the danger is not that they're a Freemason, or that they're a Rosicrucian, or that they're a monkey in a zoo. The issue is that they believe in these ideologies that are heresies and false teachings, okay? And they're trying to implement them into what Catholics believe. They're trying to infuse them into what the church teaches. And that's what's wrong. And over the years, I've been a Freemason, like I said, very active, not just in my local area or my jurisdiction, but throughout the world, very active, traveling, been in many Masonic lodges throughout the world. Never once heard the Catholic Church come up. Not once. Because, again, it's generally the rule that people don't even talk about religion or politics in the lodge. It's one of those forbidden things they don't talk about. So nobody's never heard. Only thing I heard about Catholicism when I was a Freemason was that Catholics can be Freemasons. From our perspective, from the law's perspective, they can be Freemasons, but from the church's perspective, they can't. So we knew that. We knew that Catholics can be Freemasons, even though there are Catholics who didn't know that Catholics that they can't be Freemasons. So that's really the most I ever heard about it, and so yeah, it's just one of those things. Nobody's checking. No Mason is really checking for. Checking for Catholics. It's not just a thing that Freemasons talk about. But you always hear all these, they're plotting against the church. Yeah, philosophically, the Masonic order and its philosophy is a plot against the church. But Freemasons on an individual level and lodge level, there's no plotting. You have to make a distinction as well, okay, between regular and irregular Freemasons, okay? And I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but the issues of Masonic conspiracies and plots and machinations against the church by Freemasons primarily came from places like Grand Lodges like the Grand Orients of France and several other these irregular lodges. In that case, Grand Orient of France, they're irregular because they've been deemed irregular for a long time. They're one of those, when I say irregular, it means they're regular lodges that follow the rules, follow Anderson's Constitution, lodges who descend from the Grand Lodge of England or some other Masonic Mother Grand Lodge. They're deemed regular. Lodges who aren't have that bloodline or who don't play by the rules, like the Grand Orient Friends, who you can meet atheists and belong to that Grand Lodge. Regular Grand Lodges don't have any relationship whatsoever. As a regular Freemason, I could not visit a irregular lodge or the Grand Orient of France. It's something like it's like an Orthodox Catholic can't go into a Latin Catholic church and receive the sacraments, though a Latin can't go into Orthodox. So it's one of those things that are irregular. From the Eastern perspective, Orthodox perspective, Latin Catholics are irregular, so to speak, because we have a pope, right? So
everything taught to us was a lie.
Irregular idea. Okay, so yeah, in the Grand Orient of France, lots of plots, lots of intrigue going on there, and the things that they historically have trailed. Yeah, the French Revolution, right? There's been cases made that lodge, a lodge there from Grand Orient, France, was responsible for that whole thing. So a lot of, and there's other irregular lodges like that where these things come from. So again, I'm in the weeds a little bit here. But I'm really addressing people like Voris or Timothy Gordon, who are talking about things they have no idea what they're talking about, and just throwing out things. And by doing so, without making these proper distinctions, because if you're talking, you should make distinctions, really make matters worse instead of better, because again, it presents to the Freemason that we have no idea what we're talking about. So this is somebody who we could have convinced that you shouldn't be a Freemason. When we look ignorant by telling them about things that they know aren't true, that sort of makes the case for evangelizing to them and why they should leave Freemasonry a lot harder. Sort of like telling a man that his wife is cheating on him, that you just saw her with another man at the store. Yeah, it was her twin sister, right? Actually, that man's wife is cheating on him, right? And you know it, but not that day, right? That was some other person that you saw. So you have to have your facts straight. You have to make your distinctions correct if you're going to make a solid case to these Freemasons. And most importantly, like I said, you don't have to get into the Masonic conspiracies. You don't have to get into the ritual. You can just stick with the philosophy that Freemasonry is incompatible with Catholicism and really incompatible with Christianity. And you have to lay out the case why. And from a Catholic perspective, it boils down to authority. That the church teaches that you can't be a Freemason. That this is grave matter. If you are a Catholic and a Freemason, you're excommunicated. You're not in union with the Catholic Church. You need to go to confession, right, to get back, and you have to leave Freemasonry. So it's really a simple matter. You don't have to get into ritual. You don't have to get into the conspiracy. Just stick with Freemasonry is incompatible. Freemasonry plots against the Catholic Church because it offers an alternative path to truth. For the Catholic, our truth is Jesus Christ. For Freemasonry, the truth is something else. The truth is the working tools. Freemasons believe that
Baphomet.
The word itself, masonry. You have opportunity.
Stop tap dancing. The Baphomet.
You have a Freemason who looks at that same hammer.
We got the proof.
Use his hammer. I don't have to hammer nails into the ground, but just looking at this, I see in this hammer that there's some things that I can apply philosophically, like the hammer.
Matter of fact, the video is up.
Perhaps I'm the nail, and I'm being driven to do good. Okay, so Freemasonry just takes all these different working tools of the craft of masonry and applies speculative meaning to them, applies philosophical meaning to them. And by applying that tool in a philosophical way, it makes me a better man. It makes me an upright man. It makes me walk my life in a certain way, which makes life better for me and the people around me, and make sure that I get to that celestial plane beyond death. Okay, Catholicism is teaching something different. That is the sacraments. It's Jesus Christ. It's the Holy Eucharist, right? It's the communion of God and man, right? These are two paths that have nothing whatsoever to do with one another, right? But by Freemasonry preaching this philosophy here and convincing people that you really don't need God. It's sort of like a Pelagianism, that you really don't need God. It's through your own works and through your own human effort that you can become a better person. Christianity teaches something completely different. So these are two completely different ideas about how to live your life. And so in that way, Freemasonry plots against the Catholic Church. Because it's stealing sheep and offering this false path. So that's the story. That's why Catholics can be Freemasons. It's not because of the rituals, it's because of the conspiracies. And so as Catholics,
the Most High said,
we need to focus
idol worshiping
on the
is a
issue
no-no
at our hand if we want to be successful, right? It's sort of like you're in church and it's time for the homily. Right, you just read the 3 readings. And Father starts off the homily saying, Betty, Jane, and Sue went to the store the other day and picked up some milk. He goes off this cute little anecdote that has nothing whatsoever to do with anything, okay? And you're sitting there as a Catholic wondering, what does this little cute story about Betty and Sue getting milk at a grocery store one day have to do with what we just heard in the readings, right? Father may tie it in. Chances are he won't. Right? So again, the homily in itself is, the priest himself is only participating in the ministry of the bishop, which the duty of the bishop, and one of the duties, is to preach the gospel. And so the job of the homilist, the priest, is to expound upon those readings and teach us how it connects with the Eucharist primarily, and how it connects with our own life as a Eucharistic people. That's it. It's not a time for these cute little stories. But by doing so, you're sitting there, you listen to this, you're completely off track. Now when the second part of the liturgy of the Eucharist is about to start, you have no idea why you're there, because the Father didn't connect the readings with what's about to happen next. Same with a person talking about Masonic rituals and conspiracy stories to a Freemason, and they have no idea because you're making completely no sense talking about red and blue Masons and talking about all these things that the Freemason knows that hasn't been his experience. But it is his experience whatsoever. That he knows that what Freemasonry, the teachings themselves, is the philosophy of offering this path to live a better life. Through the working tools. He understands that, right? And if you explain that and how that's divergent from the sacraments, Jesus Christ, that perhaps now you can offer something more convincing than your whatever you're saying about red and blue Masons.
Everyone deserves a healthcare partner who's there for what matters.
The short answer is no. If we're just talking about the degree work, if you look at the degree work and you're familiar with initiation rituals and rites throughout the course of humanity, there's always been these initiation rites. And a principal idea of initiation rites, the young man, he goes from a period of being in darkness into light. That he learns something about himself in that darkness, and then he comes into the light and learns new things. That's every Masonic ritual, this idea of coming to light, out of darkness into light, and that's every initiation rite that there's ever been, whether it's college fraternities or whether it's Native Americans or whether it's Incans or whatever. That's just that's the journey of manhood, and that's all Freemasonry is doing. So there's nothing, I've never seen
man-made,
even a floor work. Going in the counterclockwise circle and all this stuff. I think there's things that definitely implicit, perhaps, that you can infer. Ooh, that looks kind of demonic, right? But there's nothing explicit there that I ever seen and the Masonic rituals. And I've seen a lot of Masonic rituals. And that's another thing. That's a whole other thing, because you asked me before about, what do people not know about, misunderstand about Freemasonry, that there's like, I always hear from these people that there's like 33 degrees. Like, dude, there's hundreds of degrees. I mean, there's degrees within degrees beyond degrees. And when I say 30, there's 33 degrees. That was a 32nd. Like I was like 1 degree closer to the last degree, right? Like, no. Oh, that's just the Scottish Rite. And I told you about the York Rite. I belong to all the houses there. There's a shrine, and listen, there's something called Allied Masonic degrees. And there's like degrees Masons don't even know about throughout the world, right? There's local degrees. There's so many degrees. So there's some that are that all Freemasons tend to agree that this is the Masonic system. And again, that's the Scottish Rite, the York Rite, the Lodge. And that's essentially it. Some may throw in the allied orders like the Eastern Stars and things like that. But then beyond those ones that all Freemasons tend to agree, all Grand Lodges kind of recognize, there are like thousands of degrees. Thousands. I mean, they're out there. I knew Freemasons who were making up degrees, writing their own degrees. At one point in time in my life, I was invited to Louisiana. There's a group there who had created, made up a new Rite of Memphis, and they were doing that. And so, man, again, these people don't know what they're talking about, and they make matters worse. But back to demonic. So no, nothing. I've seen a lot of degrees, been a member of degrees that are beyond the normal recognized degrees. But there's nothing demonic there. I think what is demonic, and what opens the door up to demonic, is the Masonic idea that nothing is true, right? And when you're talking to a guy that was 22 years old, who was not grounded in anything, someone like me, well, Freemasonry becomes my religion, and it did. And so it's teaching that nothing is true. So I'm just picking things apart, right? Now there are Freemasons I think most Freemasons, were older adult men who were grounded somewhat in their faith. Most of them just middle class Protestants, so grounded in their faith. So Freemasonry really didn't have that impact upon them. But there are people like me, and I knew people like me, who Freemasonry became our religion. And that idea that nothing is true is a train wreck, to people like me. So I went from, what this led me into, I'm in Freemasonry, and I'm kind of learning all these new things, and man, all these different exposure to all these different religions, man, nothing is really true. So we're created by God who is true. God is true.
Facts.
Jesus, the way, the life, and the truth. And we were created by that God who is the truth. So we can do nothing but yearn and search for truth. That's because that's who we were created for and who we were created by. So, me in being in Freemasonry and hearing it and finding out that truth is just kind of everywhere, then it opens up my search to just search everywhere for truth. So I went from being just being a master mason and going through the degrees and really finding out, coming to a point after I'm a 32nd, I went up to York Rite. I'm still searching for truth in all these different houses. Never became a Shriner because I thought the Shrine was a joke. The Shriners didn't take themselves seriously, so I didn't take it seriously. So I knew truth wasn't there. But so I'm done with the regular degrees, and now I'm starting to get into all these other side degrees, and I'm finding out there's nothing true, right? There's nothing. It became really surface level to me. All these degrees Masonic degrees became the same. So I went and started looking other places. I started practicing witchcraft, started studying Wiccanism, find out what's true there. Okay, started studying the Rosicrucian system, so find out what's there in alchemy and these things like that. I started studying the Kabbalah. And then I joined an organization called BODA, that's Builders of the Adytum, and it's really just a school of mysteries. And I'm in this school that teaches a lot of the esoteric arts and the school of mysteries. So I'm starting to study with them, and I'm starting to get it. And it really, so that's really, I think, what's dangerous. And we say, what's demonic about Freemasonry? Well, it opens up that door to that evil. Okay. And for me, I got to a point when I'm studying all these different esoteric things, and just really getting deeper and deeper into this darkness. And I started to see some things, and started to experience some things that I knew was occult. And there's a point where I knew I was going, well, but I'm going too far now. I was agnostic, didn't necessarily believe that I could know that there was a God, but I had arrived at a point where I knew there was evil at work in this world. And that's when I started becoming just a basic Mason. I decided to leave all that stuff behind me. And what you find out when you get that deep into witchcraft, so to speak, evil, the occult, that there's some things that stay with you. And there are some things I wasn't delivered from until after came into the church and I was confirmed. And I received the sacraments. And went to confession. For me, my first confession, sometimes you hear this story, you go into confession, you come out lighter. For me, my first confession, I truly did feel lighter. And it felt like I physically felt something heavy come off me. And I felt lighter. Something dark did come off me. And that was my experience of coming into Catholicism. For me, it was an exorcism experience. I know that sounds spooky, whatever. I know that sounds dark, but it's true. It's true. I had gone too far into the occult, and so yeah. So to answer again, the question is: Freemasonry, is it demonic? No, but it opens up. It opens you up to the demonic. It does, and I'm a witness to that. I can tell you some scary things, some things I experienced, some things I seen. But my journey into Catholicism delivered me from all that. For me, it's an exorcism experience, receiving the sacraments of initiation. So yeah, that's my Masonic confession story. David O'Gray, Catholic convert, former Freemason. Hope that was insightful to you. Hope you gained some new insights. If this is something that you've already known, some of these things you've already known. The hope here is that, and also in conjunction with the article that's attached to this video, that you can see a clear path about how to evangelize to as a Catholic, evangelize to Freemasons, especially the Catholic ones, because those are ones we can really just point to authority. And that's really just the main point here. I want to give you a path to be able to speak to Freemasons in a clear and articulate way and tell them point blank why they cannot be Freemasons. It's because it's the teachings of the church. And that if you are a Freemason, that you are a Catholic, you are excommunicated, and you are not in union with the church, and you need to go to confession. You don't need to be receiving the sacraments of the Holy Eucharist. You are not a member of Christ's church anymore if you are a Freemason. Okay? So, and that's the bottom line. We don't have to get into the ritual. We don't have to get into the Masonic conspiracy stories. Those are cool, that's sexy. But it's a distraction, I believe, instead of just being point blank and being very clear with people that the church teaches this. And as a Catholic, you're obliged to believe what the church teaches. You don't have a choice. Either if you don't accept this, then you're no longer a Catholic. All right? So it's just that.